launched Bounce dryer sheets in 1975. Prior to that, there was no such thing as dryer sheets. So they launched this brand new type of product with the functional benefit of wrinkle-free clothes. Because this Bounce dryer sheet contains wrinkle-relaxing ingredients, you put them in the dryer and voila, your clothes are wrinkle-free. For several years, wrinkle-free was the functional benefit that they messaged in all of their communications. So a few years into their launch, customers readily understood that Bounce brought them the benefit of clothes that are wrinkle-free. With that functional benefit of wrinkle-free solidified, after a few years, Bounce laddered up that functional benefit to the higher order benefit of attractive clothes. The customer hears that Bounce makes their clothes attractive. And the reason they believe that promise is that they know Bounce makes their clothes wrinkle-free. Notice how what was previously the promise, wrinkle-free clothes, now serves as a reason to believe in the higher order benefit of attractive clothes. Bounce then owned this higher order meaning in customers' minds. And then again, several years later, when customers readily grasped that Bounce makes their clothes attractive, Bounce laddered up again, this time to the more emotional benefit of feeling pretty. With Bounce, you can feel pretty. Why? Because your clothes look attractive. This benefit ladder enables you a reality check of what is meaningful and believable to your customer audience, given where you are in your relationship with your audience. You need to be honest with yourself about how emotional your audience will let you be about your brand. If Bounce had launched with a promise of feel pretty before people even knew what dryer sheets were, it would have been confusing and disingenuous. So the latter helps you ensure that you're not overstepping with your customer by promising something so big they won't believe it or won't understand it. The latter also helps you to see where you're going. How are you going to keep delivering an ever larger, ever more emotional benefit? Why is it a good idea to keep delivering an ever larger, ever more emotional benefit? Why should you never rest on your laurels and deliver a functional benefit without pushing it upward on this ladder? There are a few reasons. The first reason is your profit margin. The larger and more emotional the benefit that you bring, the more customers are willing to pay for your offering, and the healthier your margins will be. People are willing to pay more to feel pretty than for a piece of electrostatic cloth drenched in Downy. The second reason is your competitive moat. The higher on this ladder your brand's position, the more difficult it is for others to copy. It's easy to copy an ingredient, and it's hard to copy with credibility a promise of feeling pretty. The third reason is headroom to grow. The higher on the ladder you are, the more categories you can play in, the more you can grow laterally. If you own Feel Pretty, you can go into categories outside of dryer sheets. So your room for growth is more spacious. So now it's time to build your benefit ladder. I advise starting toward the bottom of your ladder with your functional benefit. What is that functional benefit your customer will enjoy if they choose your offering? What are the factual reasons they should believe that benefit? Now, look at the next rung up on your ladder. What does that functional benefit enable for your customer at a bigger, more emotional level? Because of that functional benefit, how is her day better? And lastly, what is that highest order benefit, that most emotional benefit that ultimately your customer enjoys because they purchased your product? Because of you, how is her life better? Your positioning statement captures all of the things you've just created in one distilled statement. It shows for yourself and for your teams and for your partners the essence of your brand's position. I recommend that you start by putting this into plain words that answer these questions. Who is your target customer? So for my Swedish pancake business, my target customer is moms with kids at home. What is the name of your brand? For my pancake business, it's called Batter Pancakes. What is your customer's frame of reference? My target customer is considering us versus other pancake mixes. What is your brand promise? Our unique promise is that we bring Swedish deliciousness. And what are your reasons to believe? Our customer can believe that promise because our pancakes are super thin, pack a crispy crunch, and use my Swedish grandma's recipe. What is the customer end reward for having chosen your brand? Because our customer has used Batter Pancakes, her family can start their weekend with extraordinary. Here's what this looks like in a positioning statement. To moms with kids at home, Batter Pancakes is the one pancake mix that brings Swedish deliciousness. That's because only Batter Pancakes bring super thin pancakes with a crispy crunch using our Swedish grandmother's recipe so that your family can start their weekend with extraordinary. Now do this for your business. Answer these questions and put them into this positioning statement format. Once you have this positioning statement, congratulate yourself. You've defined the crux of your brand's position. Human beings connect better with people than they do with amorphous concepts. So knowing that, we articulate what our brand is, like as a person, how they show up, how they talk. That allows us to apply this style when interacting with our customers with everything we do, from our messaging to our imagery to our product experience. Our brand character is another way for our customer to bond with us, and it's another source of differentiation. So let's turn to that. The first thing I like to start with when defining our brand's character is to identify our character archetype. We are hardwired to connect with stories. You may be familiar with Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist. He was a student of Freud, and he studied storytelling across time and culture. And while studying stories, he found that there are only a handful of stories that have ever been told among humans, and there are only a handful of characters who have ever shown up in those stories. He identified 12 total characters, and he called them the character archetypes. In a second, I'll go through what the character archetypes are. But to tie this back to marketing, some marketing people took this Jung character archetype idea and applied it to brands. It turns out that the great brands of the world tend to be one of these 12 character archetypes. The 12 archetypes are the innocent, the everyman, the hero, the jester, the lover, the caregiver, the ruler, the sage, the explorer, the rebel, the creator, and the magician. There are two reasons that I like to start with a character archetype when defining our brand's character. The first is it's practical. Defining your brand's character can be such an overwhelming, nebulous idea. Why not let mythology do some of the work for us to help us narrow it down? The second reason I like character archetypes is that it's another source of differentiation. If your category, if the types of brands that you compete with are all one primary archetype, you can zag while the others zig by showing up as a different archetype. For example, if you're Starbucks in the 1970s, most coffee brands are either the caregiver or the lover. So Starbucks really pushed far away from that and showed up as the explorer archetype. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to just review these archetypes. I've included a worksheet in the exercise files so you can read a little bit about the core goal of these archetypes and see if one comes up for you. See if there's an archetype that just feels like it's your business. Most of the time, businesses I work with quickly zero in on about 2 of these archetypes. And sometimes it's clear we're just this archetype. Sometimes it's 3, but see if you can narrow yours down. If it's not coming to you right away, here are some steps for zeroing in on that archetype. First, review your insights. Go back to the phase where you listen to your customers and you identify the key themes and insights, and then look at your competitors and map out what brand character you think your competitors embody. Second, go back to your insights and think, channel your customer, put yourself in his shoes. If your business were a person, a character in your customer's story, what character archetype does your business play? Third, check with your own business's story. Do you have an instinctive feeling about what character your business plays? 4, name your archetype. Note, if you're still having trouble selecting an archetype, there are some tests out there. You can Google Jung archetype tests, and there are a number of publicly available tools to help. At the end of the day, knowing your brand's archetype, 1, makes it easier to organize brand meaning and communicate it so that everyone is bringing to life your brand in a consistent, congruent way. And 2, it helps you to differentiate, to not be the category cliche. Personality descriptors are shorthand words that work together to describe the character of the brand. Think of it like describing the personality of a friend or family member or a person you admire. How would you describe him or her? You're now doing that same thing for your brand. If your brand were a person, what would be the words that you'd use to describe him or her? What is this person like? How would you describe this brand if it were a person? Tonality descriptors are shorthand words that work together to describe the tone of voice for your brand. If you were describing the above friend or family member or a person you admire, you'd start with the personality descriptors and then you describe the way that this friend talks or writes. What do they sound like? What is their style of speaking? What is the energy of their voice? So go ahead and write a bunch of personality descriptors and a bunch of tonality descriptors. And once you've done that, start kind of clustering them and seeing if you can consolidate them to 3 or maybe 4 words that describe the personality and 3 or maybe 4 words that describe the tonality. If you're having trouble doing this, then one approach to get you unstuck is this. Instead of going so far as to boil it down to 1 word, write a phrase or a sentence about what kind of person your business would be. Come up with 3 of them, 3 of those phrases or sentences. So, always loves to party might be 1. And then once you've done that, once you have about 3 of those that kind of surrounds the personality, see if you can boil each of those down to a word. So for example, if one of my phrases were the kind of person who always takes the high road, even when or especially when no one is looking, I might make the personality descriptor for that phrase noble. Or if the tonality phrase is speaks to you as a peer would speak to you, not as a teacher or mentor would speak to you, I would put for a tonality descriptor either friendly or informal. What's useful about designating your brand's personality and tonality is that it can become a guide for you and for others who speak and write for your brand, so that in all of your brand's touch points, whether it's copy or social media or direct mail, even just how the phone is answered and what your email signature includes, it can all speak as a single personality with a single voice. When a brand comes across in a consistent way, it feels more like a real person, and that breeds liking and trust and credibility. It helps your audience to bond with you in the way that they bond with a person. What we're going to do now is called brand edges. Brand edges dimensionalize each of these personality and tonality words that we just came up with. It's really useful, especially when writing copy for our brand, to be able to refer to this to show, okay, I'm leaning in too strongly on this word, or I'm not emphasizing this aspect of my personality enough. Take your 3 or 4 personality descriptors and your 3 or 4 tonality descriptors, and for each one, write a word to the left that's the same idea but not quite as strong as you mean, and then a word to the right that's the same idea but more strong than you mean. For example, if I had chosen for my personality word noble, I might put to the left of that as not strong enough the word moral or honest. Our personality is more than just moral or honest, it's noble. To the right of noble, I might put altruistic or self-righteous to show that that's going too far. Noble is just right. Similarly, for tonality, say I'd chosen the word friendly to describe our tonality. I might choose as my not strong enough word the word approachable. We're friendly. We're not just approachable, we're friendly. I might choose my word for being too far as chummy, because we're friendly, but we're not going to be chummy with you. Friendly is just right. Go ahead and do that now for all of your words. This is a place where I find the thesaurus really useful to give you some ideas for the shades of meaning for words that mean things similar to this. One reason that defining your brand's edges is so useful is that it further likens your brand to a real person rather than a caricature of a person. People are nuanced. Some people who are friendly are downright chummy, friendly in an overt and perhaps even loud way. Other friendly people are more quietly so. By defining your brand's edges, you give texture and nuance to your personality and tonality so that you're not coming across as a caricature or a cliche, which your customer is less likely to bond with. The other reason brand edges are so useful is very pragmatic. It empowers your teams to express your brand consistently without your intervening to explain. It's a tool for pushing decision-making away from you so that others can voice the brand. When you're asking people on various teams, both internal and external, to bring your brand to life, it's easier for each of those people representing your brand to grasp and express your brand's character if you add some dimension to it. It becomes a tool for them to use to evaluate their own speaking and writing. They know they're going for friendly, but not chummy. So by claiming friendly, but not chummy, they're more equipped to know that nuance and bring it to life accordingly. You may be familiar with the idea of a sales funnel or a customer journey. A customer goes through sequential stages in their relationship with your brand. First, they are unaware, and then they're aware, and then they comprehend, and then they consider, then they purchase, and then they're loyal. During this step, you take that funnel and you identify the single message you want to convey to your customer at each stage of that journey. You're not going to get hung up yet on copywriting or wordsmithing. You're just going to capture the idea that you want your copy to get across. What's powerful about using this level of granularity in your customer journey is you can meet your customer exactly where they are. Instead of trying to come up with a message that tries to do everything and winds up being confusing, you take your fences one at a time and give them one message to get them one stage further into the journey. When tailoring messages according to the journey, think of the analogy of dating. You don't go on a first date with somebody and propose marriage on that first date. Your goal is to get to a second date, and at the second date, you hope that you get to a third date, and so on. It's similar here. When you think of your target customer who is unaware of what you offer, what is the one thing that you can say to that person that will inch them along in the funnel, inch them along in their journey? You start with a message that makes them aware of you and that would likely be a basic explanation of what your brand is. Don't get too fancy, just give them a way in. For my pancake brand, I'd say we are a pancake mix called Batter Pancakes. Now, your customer is aware of you, but they aren't really grasping it yet, so you inch them along so that they comprehend you. This is often where I communicate the brand promise. This is where I communicate that our batter pancakes bring Swedish deliciousness. Now your customer is aware of you and comprehends that your batter pancakes that bring Swedish deliciousness. But still isn't really considering it yet. This is often where I give the reasons to believe, because to inch them into considering it, they need to see that this promise is real and true. So I say, our pancakes are super thin, crispy, and use my grandmother's Swedish recipe. Now they're aware, comprehending, and considering you. What helps them purchase you might be something you say on your box or at the point of purchase, such as satisfaction guaranteed. Now they have bought your product, and your goal is to make them loyal. Your product plays the key role here so that it delivers on your promise of Swedish deliciousness. Other things that you can do to enhance their loyalty could be the storytelling on the back of the box about the way your grandmother introduced this recipe to your family. Or it could be that, unlike other pancake boxes, there is an easy packaging reseal mechanism. Or it could be that you're invited to be part of a community of pancake breakfast families that also enjoy Swedish pancakes. These are all post-purchase delighter examples, and you should use them effectively so that your loyal customers will remain loyal, keep buying your product, and encourage their friends to do the same. At this point, you're probably developing actual messaging copy and creative to bring your brand to life. For example, maybe you want to drive awareness with your homepage, and you've hired a designer or copywriter to develop creative and or copy. Once you make that decision, it's really powerful to get into the discipline of getting your thoughts down into a one-page creative brief. The creative brief shows exactly what is needed and lays out the goals for the piece of creative that you're developing. That way, when you're evaluating what's been developed, instead of making a subjective call on whether you like what they created, you can instead be evaluating it against the brief. This makes it a less subjective exercise and a more objective one. The goal of the copy being developed is not just to please you in a really general, vague way, but rather the goal is to nail this creative brief that you've developed. In your creative brief, you're setting the strategic direction for the copy you're about to develop. You name these things. Who is your target audience for this piece of creative? This might be your target audience in general, or a smaller subset that you know will be interacting with this piece of copy. What is your desired customer action after having interacted with this copy? Whatever that is, be very specific. What is the net takeaway? If they remember nothing else from this copy, what will be the one thing they remember? What is your brand personality and tonality? You've already written this, so add it to your creative briefs to remind whoever is developing your creative that everything you do should bring to life that brand personality and that brand tonality. Lastly, you need to designate your executional mandatories. Executional mandatories are the non-negotiables. Oftentimes, this would be something like, must always use our trademarked tagline, or must feature a photo of a mother and a child, or must be such and such size. So, now you've written your creative brief, and you've shared it with the copywriter or the team member who will be using it to develop creative or copy for you. When they come back to you, you're going to evaluate what they show you according to this brief. Once you're ready to go through the exercise of evaluating creative and copy, I have a framework I encourage you to use. I call it the HOPE framework, and it's a 3-step process that can be your guide so that you're looking at your piece of creative from many angles. The 3 steps to the HOPE framework are heart, on point, and execution. First, let's talk about the heart step. This is your immediate gut reaction to what they're showing you. Don't even think about it, just notice your response. Do you like how it makes you feel when you first see it? Do you just like it? This is a purely subjective, non-analytical response, so take note of your gut reaction and then set it aside. Number 2, is this piece of creative on point? Does it express the creative brief that you provided? Does it deliver on the net takeaway from your creative brief? Is it on tone and on personality? Does it solve the directive outlined in the brief? This step is a much more analytical thinking step, and since you've already taken into account your gut response, you now free up your analytical brain to take over and evaluate how well this piece of creative delivers on the strategic directive that you set out. Number 3 is execution. Imagine that this piece of creative is in the marketplace. What will it look like? How will it be perceived? Does it have some tactical, pragmatic advantages or disadvantages? For example, if it's a piece of copy, is it nice and short? If it's a logo, will it print well if the recipient only has a black and white printer? If it's a name, is it something that's legally available? These are the very minute details that can separate something that's viable from something that's not viable. Most people have a natural inclination to lean toward one of these 3 steps, to be very gut-oriented about creative, or to be very analytical, or to get into the executional details. For many not used to marketing material, they go with their gut. For others who do this for a living, they get into analytical mode. It's fine to have a preference or an orientation. The trick is not to stop there. Know about yourself what your tendency is, and then use this framework to ensure you're looking at this from all angles.